Hello and welcome back to another edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode. And boy, after the final crown jewel weekend of 2026, we've got a lot to discuss pertaining to the Lilly Diabetes 100 and the Northern 200 at the Stone Yard. Chris Barrymore has finally won a points paying race for the first time since 2024. Ronnie Woods Motorsports is now the first team in ASCA history, first four-car team to send all of their drivers to victory lane in one season. Incredible dominance from RWM as of late. We'll talk all about that. We also got to talk about the championship fight. Braeden Bennett, what a response to all the recent pressure from Todd Kidd. He stepped up, and he stepped up in a big way to capitalize on Kidd's abysmal outing. And now with three races to go, he's got a comfortable title lead heading into Computer Motor Speedway. We're also going to talk about the Blue Ovals again. Ford 3, 4, 5 in the finishing order. Are they close to breaking through for the first time this season? Well, before it ends, we'll see. We also got to talk the Craftsman Series title fight because, per usual, it was hectic, as it always is whenever Caden Dunham is involved. Man, we'll talk about all of that. Caden Dunham versus Gunnar Thorson and previewing the final two there. And then huge news. An iconic last name returns to the grid next season. Garrett Hood. Yes, the son of that Jimmy Hood, ASC Hall of Famer. He will be behind the wheel of his father's iconic number 88 at the Craftsman level next season for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, flanked by Chandler Mills full time. We'll break down all of that. Ronnie Woods Motorsports revealing their full Craftsman Series lineup. And then we're going to preview, there's only one race this upcoming week. It's the Apple 225. We'll preview that and what it means for the title fight. But first, before we get into it, we got to shout out the ASCA's merch shop. You already know. Click that link in bio and use coupon code season12 to save 30% off at checkout. You can cop some Chris Barrymore gear if you've been a longtime fan that stuck around waiting for him to finally break through. Well, he finally did. And you can cop some of his gear, the highest paid driver in the sport. And then shout out to Circle B Diecast / Plan B Sales. Use coupon code ASCA for reduced shipping on any orders, $30 and more inside the US. So without further ado, let's get into it. And we'll start out the pod by talking about Chris Barrymore, and rightfully so. It was only a matter of time, I felt like. And heading to the Stone Yard, I think we kind of expected Barrymore would be a threat. We weren't sure if he'd be able to get it done because it looked like it'd be a Braeden Bennett versus Todd Kidd kind of weekend. And we'll get into why it wasn't in just a second. But yeah, Chris Barrymore capitalized on both of them really not being race win contenders, at least not Bennett, until the end, and was able to track down his predecessor at Ronnie Woods Motorsports, Ross Jackson, who had the dominant car, but crew chief Sheldon Price, it's got to be one knock on him, is he has sometimes failed to make the proper adjustments to keep up with the racetrack. You looked at a couple of those times last season. I look at the Windows 300 and the Northern 200 last year, where Diego Ricciti was dominant all night long, and Todd Kidd was able to make the proper adjustments, get the track position late, and steal both of those wins. And that, of course, in a scenario where the season ended in a tiebreaker, that decided the championship. So, yeah, that is one knock on Sheldon Price, and it's a tough break for Jackson, who was dominant for really the first time in his Cup Series career, led a race high 109 laps, but only has a seventh place finish to show for it. Quite unfortunate for him, but a great night nevertheless for Chris Barrymore, his successor, I mentioned at RWM. Finally, back in victory lane for the first time since being at the Stone Yard a couple years ago, 2024, when he held off Cameron Atwood. Atwood was the one challenging Barrymore late, but you could tell the five was kind of in a league of its own on that final stint. And Carter Williams, that crew chief, they finally got things right for their driver. And finally, Barrymore was able to really wasn't much pressure out front. You know, when the Windows 300, obviously Bernd Renner was catching late and Barrymore cracked, but Barrymore really managed his tires and the race extremely well late. He knew not to push too much too soon. And of course, the Stone Yard has always been, I would say, probably his best track. He's actually the ASC all-time wins leader here. No, 7 wins overall. Now that's including Craftsman and Cup races, because just Cup, obviously still Diego Urquidy is the all-time wins leader, despite not having won here since 2021. He's not nearly as dominant as he used to be, 4-time champion, but Barrymore, though, has been really good here as of late. You'd think he probably could have won the Craftsman race as well, but he just jumped the cushion, pushed the limits a little too much on the opening start. And he learned his lesson from his mistake in the Craftsman series. He learned his lesson, did not do that again on the initial start in the Northern 200. And well, not the initial start per se, but he was patient on the initial start because he did drop back to 6. Remember that. But the next restart, when Carson Smith slammed the door shut on him, Barrymore could have just sent him. He could have just sent him. He could have tried to dive bomb him, but Barrymore was patient. He aired Smith out on the radio, got his frustrations out, then settled back in and did the job, got Smith back, eventually got Jackson back, and the rest is history. And the crazy part, for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, we were just kind of discussing, I think a couple weeks ago, did Michael Wire Racing have the strongest driver lineup on the grid heading into 2027? Well, now you look at Chris Barrymore performing to the level that we kind of expected him to perform. And I think it's even still a little bit below the level because he still isn't even top 10 in points at this time in the campaign. But he's getting there. He's definitely getting there. And you look at that lineup of Kidd, obviously right up there, second in points, defending champion, one of the best in the sport. That's obvious. Shane Park, third in points, salvaging his terrible start to the season. Colin Ward had a fast start to the season, kind of falling off as of late, but you give him an extra year of experience. He's starting to settle into the prime of his career. He's definitely going to be a title threat moving forward. The one team that's been lagging behind all season long has been Barrymore. And now the 5 teams starting to hit their stride. They're starting to get it together. They obviously just won this race. They won the All-Star race. They won a duel earlier this season. I'll tell you what, you head into 2027, I definitely think that new season, having a full year at the team, you got to remember it's a brand new environment for Barrymore. He's been at Ford his entire career. Now he moves over to Chevy, Ronnie Woods Motorsports, brand new environment. Needed some time to adjust. Seems like he's finally adjusted, finally starting to hit his stride. It's going to be interesting because we've heard some rumors that Ronnie Woods Motorsports might be getting rid of Carter Williams at the end of the season. We'll see if they end up following through with that. I think that would kind of be a mistake at this point, right? Because Barrymore and Williams have really started to gel as of late and started to really kind of figure things out. So I really think you head into year 2 of his 4-year, $56 million contract. I think Barrymore is going to be a lot better next season. And I think that could very well be one of his best shots at a championship. He just needs obviously to get off to a much faster start to the season. And you think with no new regulations, a year of experience at the team, I think Barrymore is definitely a name you got to watch out for as a 2027 title contender, especially with the momentum they're now carrying at the end of this year. And Ronnie Woods Motorsports as a whole, again, they've been dominant. The problem for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, and I discussed this on Twitter after the race, your second, your third, your 5th, and your 12th in the standings. All 4 of your drivers have wins. The first time in ASCA history. It's the first team to do this in the sport entirely, bring all 4 of their cars in victory lane since Urquidy Boats Racing a decade ago. We're talking 2016, and that was only 3 cars. Actually, correction, they didn't even bring all 4 because they had Ryan Braun on the team. So scratch that. That didn't even count for Urquidy Boats Racing because Ryan Braun did not win a race for them that season. But yeah, you get my point. Like, they've been historically dominant this season. And yet they still might not win the championship because Braeden Bennett, you got to give this 25-year-old credit, man. I mentioned it last week that his first title fight in the sport did not go well. In the Craftsman series, it's no secret. He choked. He fell. He cracked under the pressure. He couldn't handle it going up against Ross Jackson and Carson Smith. it was his rookie season at the Craftsman level, right? It is what it is. We expected him to kind of bounce back in 2023, his second season, full season in the number 18. He wasn't even a title threat at all. He had a lot of bad luck. He only won one race, and that was due to some shenanigans at the end of that race. Doug Bowden really should have won, but hey, a win is a win. And he's gotten plenty more undisputed Craftsman wins to make up for it. But yeah, it was a disappointing sophomore campaign, but he still gets the call up to go to Mike White Racing in the 11. And obviously, the past two seasons, he hasn't really been in title contention. Even the last year, I think he definitely could have been. But obviously, Mike White Racing were fully focused on 2026 instead of 2025. And Bennett, he was performing at the level of Caden Dunham last year, just didn't quite have the equipment. This year, he's got the equipment. And boy, he has coped with the pressure brilliantly. I really thought that that initial run down into turn one in the Northern 200, I thought that was going to be the difference in the championship right there. That was going to dictate the entire race and how things were going to play out. If Todd Kidd escaped turn one with the race lead, I think while he might not have gone on to win that race, I think he leaves the Stone Yard as the points leader. I really do. Because his car was not handling well once he got back in dirty air. They probably set the car up for clean air, expecting him to be out front. Bennett obviously did end up taking the lead into turn one, and he played it brilliantly. It was a game of chicken, like Jimmy Hood said in his in-depth analysis. It was a game of chicken heading down to turn one. Who was going to keep their foot in it the longest? And Bennett had the preferred lane. He got a great launch on the outside. They were neck and neck, and that's when you knew, okay, Bennett probably is going to have the advantage. And it was all about that initial launch. That was what everyone was focused on. And Bennett got the perfect initial launch to be neck and neck, had the preferred lane on the outside. Kidd eventually did have to lift. He made a little bit of contact with Bennett there, but he did end up lifting because he didn't want a repeat of the Barrymore Trenton situation, because it's not like last year where Kidd and Urquidy could take each other out and Shane Park was so far back that he couldn't capitalize. No, Park is right there. He was 15 points back. Now it's 20, but he's still, you get the point. He's like within a race of these guys. So if they bin it, he's right there. Bryn Renner's still right there. Colin Ward's still right there. Like, there's other guys right in title contention. So you can't afford to take as many risks as Kidd did last season. And that's why he had to back out of it. But his car was just not good in traffic, not good in traffic at all. And he ends up finishing outside the top 10, coming off 4 straight top 3 finishes and back-to-back wins. So you look at that, the gap was 3 points entering the night. It ended the night at 13 for Bennett with just 3 races remaining. That's huge. That's a giant gap. Like, that's over 10 positions. Even if Kidd wins and leads the most laps, that's about 8 to 10 positions that Bennett can afford to finish behind him. Now, granted, again, Bennett cannot take his foot off the throttle. It's not over. It's far from over. And there's still a long ways to go. A lot can change in these final 3 weeks. We just saw it last year when Todd Kidd and Ross Jackson had their incident. We saw it a couple years ago where Laquan Scranton and Diego Urquidy got into it in the Apple 225. And Diego was poised to enter one and leave the Apple 225 just 1 point back of Cameron Atwood in the championship. And he ended up like a full race behind because Atwood was right there to capitalize. And that was pretty much that. And Atwood comes the title. So Bennett can't get too comfortable because this is far from over. And like I said, Michael Wright Racing, they got to keep their foot on the throttle. Granted, last time out, Computer Motor Speedway, they finished 1, 2, 3. And so that bodes extremely well for them. Bennett finished 3rd. He just needs to bring home, like he's gotten it to a point where he doesn't have to win now. He can afford to bring home solid top 5 finishes, but that's if Todd Kidd is not winning races. And that's a big if, because again, Rodney Woods Motorsports have been historically dominant as of late. But again, all that historic dominance could be for naught if they can't bring home the championship, So that's the intriguing thing. They've got guys 2, 3, and 5 in the title fight, but they still might not have a championship to show for it. And that'd be crazy. And that's a huge testament to Braeden Bennett because 25 years old, just his third year in the sport, not many drivers can cope with title pressure like that. Like we saw Greg Healy kind of in a similar situation. His first time in a title fight, a true title fight, he cracked. He cracked under the pressure, could not handle Diego Urquidy. Um, we've seen it in the past. Todd Kidd, same sort of deal. It takes these guys time to build up to, becoming a champion in the sport. And Bennett has stepped right in, first time in a true title fight. He's coping with the pressure brilliantly, and he's 3 races away from being rewarded with his first title. And I think that if Bennett does end up taking it home, I think we're going to look back at that start to the Northern 200 and be like, that was what did it. That was what secured his first championship. And that is truly the beauty of every race meaning something. All 17 races mean something. They all matter equally. And so moving on, we'll talk about the Blue Ovals now next. And Ford, I think they made a lot of progress as of late. It's hard to say if they're going to win this season because there are only 3 races left, but we are heading to a couple high-speed aero-sensitive tracks, and that concerns me. I think that they could win Belltown. With who? I don't know. Probably Cameron Atwood, if I had to guess. He's definitely the one I would bank on winning the most. Obviously, Cup champion, dominant on short tracks, But Carson Smith has been really solid as of late. Started to bounce back. Really, he definitely needed that 4th place finish at the Stone Yard for sure. He definitely needed that with all the drama surrounding him and Diego. Take the spotlight off that for a bit, put it on him bringing home a 4th place finish. And then Graham Darty, the rookie, he had a pit penalty. He was due to restart 4th on that second restart, lap 69. He was due to restart 4th. If he doesn't get that pit penalty, he was one of the fastest cars on the racetrack all night. Darty could have very well been in contention to win the race. But he ends up battling back from the pit penalty as far back as 12th, rebounds, gets a top 5 finish in his first Cup trip to the Stone Yard. Extremely impressive outing for Darty. And that's huge for that 2 team. And obviously they need to clean some stuff up on pit road. But you're looking at it this season, and while he is 14th in points, you're definitely seeing the development in Darty week by week, especially now later in the season. He's got some experience under his belt. He's starting to get more comfortable racing these big boys, starting to get more confidence in beating the likes of Diego Urquidy or Randall Woods, champions of the sport, even a Todd Kidd, Greg Healy, beating champions of the sport consistently on a weekly basis to kind of tell him, even at 20 years old, hey, I can do this. And so I think that Ford definitely has a shot. We'll see how their high-speed aero-sensitive track program is working. We'll see if it's gotten any better. I don't think it has because they were terrible in the Windows 300. They were at West Virginia. Diego Urquidy was flying towards the end of that race. I definitely think that he could win, and it'd be a travesty if Diego went winless this season. To snap his 12-year winless streak, win streak, yearly win streak, that is. It'd be a travesty if he went winless. And the last time he went this deep into a modern era season without a win was he ended up getting it done at West Virginia back in 2023. And while he is certainly well out of title contention, in fact, I think he's going to be officially mathematically eliminated after next week, heading into the penultimate round, which is crazy. We're talking about a 4-time champion in Diego Urquidy, who's never finished lower than 5th in points, getting mathematically eliminated from title contention with 2 races to go in the season. Like, that's insane. Just a couple years ago, we were talking about him clinching the title at West Virginia, and now he's mathematically eliminated. Crazy how quickly things can change in this sport. But I definitely think that Ford is going to win soon. One of these last 3, they're due. They are well overdue at this point. And Atwood especially, he's had so much bad luck, so much things. Even at the Craftsman level, he can't catch a break. He probably should have won that race at the Craftsman level, but Pit crew lost him a couple spots. Strategy also lost him a spot. We'll talk about that in a second briefly, but yeah, so Ford's due. I think that Atwood's the most likely. Schmidt could definitely win as well. Don't be shocked if he does. He is a defending Apple 225 winner, but that's on a completely different track surface. So take that with a grain of salt. Things are completely different from at CMS from 2025 to 2026. Doherty probably not going to win. I just think he hasn't really led many laps. He doesn't have race winning pace, but that's not to say he's not improving, because he certainly is. He can definitely win a race next season for sure. And then Diego, I don't know. He needs to qualify much better to have a shot at victory. He has to qualify much better, because they've been terrible in qualifying since the interim crew chief, Ken Bernanke, joined. And obviously he's an interim crew chief. So, you're not expecting his performance to be right up there, but definitely would expect better than for him to be qualifying row 7, row 8 each week. So if Diego really wants to win, he's got to improve his qualifying and his one lap pace in these final 3 weeks. But I actually err on the side that he's going to go winless this season, which would be a shocking development after literally being tied for the championship last season. This year, he now posts one of the worst seasons of his career to date. But Craftsman series, oh boy, Caden Dunham versus Gunnar Thorson. This is the ASCA's Todd Kidd versus Diego Urquidy in 2026. Man, if you're not watching the Craftsman series this year, you are missing out, because my goodness, I mean, it's a box office special each week. Say what you want about Caden Dunham. Love him or hate him. I know pretty much the consensus is everyone hates him. But man, this kid makes these races so entertaining to watch. And it all started at the beginning of the race. After Barrymore and Trenton ended up out of the race. Tough break for Zach Trenton, by the way. Want to give him a huge shout out. 18 years old to drive as well as he did at the Soneyard. Rookie, his first time even seeing the track, other than, you racing, like seeing it in person, in the flesh. He drops out there and goes fastest in opening practice. Like that, you're not supposed to do that as a teenager rookie. So I think he definitely could have had a shot for the win, and it's a shame that he ended up getting robbed of that. But yeah, that kid, I think he's got a lot of potential, and a lot of people are sleeping on him. He's been really solid this season. But let's talk about the restart after that. Caden Dunham. First off, this was an extremely stupid decision on his part. I have no idea why he punted Tony Delval II getting into the quarter. I get that the two are rivals. He wanted to prove a point. It was really dumb. He was going to pass Delval probably regardless. Even if he didn't, he would have moved up to second place because he had pushed Delval so far out in front. But it was an extremely ill-advised decision, and ended up getting him a black flag. Shout out to race director Josh Player, finally laying his foot down, drive-through penalty for Dunham. And that was his race. His entire race was compromised right there. And Gunnar Thorson, I think, blew a big opportunity. He definitely should have left this race with the points lead, but he said it himself on the Thursday, in practice. He just didn't think that Taylor Motorsports has the raw pace that Dunham and the Ford Development Program do right now. The problem is Dunham can't get out of his own way. He had a speeding penalty later in the race as he was picking his way through the field. That sent him to the rear, tail on the lead lap again. It's just, the kid's reckless. He's out of control. He got into Reynard at the end. Now he's got another driver bad at him. I mean, it's chaos. It is pure unadulterated chaos just watching Caden Dunham drive. And that's what makes these races so fun. And that's what makes this title fight so fun. Because you have the chaotic Caden Dunham versus a cool and calm, measured Gunnar Thorson. And they've just been trading these haymakers back and forth. Thorson won 2 out of 3. Dunham won 3 out of 4 poles. Swept his home track. Thorson responds with a solid race, but not a great race. But now you got the gap down to 1 point heading into the final 2 races. And we'll obviously preview the penultimate round at San Diego much more next week. But yeah, so we'll talk about the black flag. Was it too harsh or too lenient? I'd err on the side of probably too lenient, actually. I think he probably should have been outright parked. And I will say to Dunham's credit, that the incident with Reynard was a racing deal because we saw Graham Doherty do a similar thing to Norm Lester in the Cup race. Like it's extremely easy to get tight off turn two there and that in that section of the track and clip a guy's left rear. If you don't, take your foot out of it. And these are incredibly young drivers we're talking about here. I think that was a racing deal. Just Dunham being genuinely impatient, not malicious or anything, but obviously the move on Delval certainly was. He thought he was cleaning Delval out. Maybe he was trying to take out Bennett as well. I think he probably should have been parked after that, honestly. And if he was, that would have really flipped the title fight on its head. But he got the black flag. He got a chance to recover. He did somewhat. Had to get some help from his pit crew, assistance to get around Doug Bowden. They did. But he threw that away when he was caught speeding. And just a marathon of a race for him. But that's the thing about Dunham is he's so talented. That was by far the worst performance of his ASCA career to date, I would say. And the guy still finished 11th and left with the points lead up against one of Gunnar Thorson's best performances of the season. Like that just goes to show you what Thorson is up against. Like this is not going to be easy. As many enemies as Dunham has, his raw pace is unmatched and it's not even close. Like I think that he's proven it's crazy to say this, as good as Delval was and as solid as Thorson has been this season, but I think he's a cut above Delval and Thorson. I think he's maybe even cut above Doherty. It's debatable between Dunham and Doherty who's better. We're going to find out next season for sure, but yeah, I do think he should have been parked though for that incident with Delval, and yeah, he got lucky that he wasn't. Black flag though was, yeah, I'm glad that some sort of discipline finally happened from the race director down to Dunham, and that was big. I don't think he learned from it though. Still being on the limit there, but he was racing much cleaner the rest of the race. And yeah, these final 2 weeks are going to be something. I think that both of these guys, Dunham and Thorson, desperately need this off week to kind of regroup, recharge, fly out to San Diego, and prep for these final two short track races. San Diego and Belltown to wrap up the season. Man, I'll tell you what, if Thorson ends up behind Dunham with the championship on the line at Belltown, oh boy, that's going to be must-watch TV. But yeah, let's move on to Ronnie Wood's Motorsports, revealing their full 2027 Craftsman Series lineup. Cup lineup, of course, remains unchanged. No long-term deal announced for Shane Park, but we're getting the inkling that they're close on inking something. But we've heard nothing about Colin Ward's long-term contract, and that's definitely going to be a point of contention throughout the offseason. Can they get a long-term deal done with Ward, even though he wants to be made the highest paid driver in the sport? And again, I'm not sure if he's worth that. But again, that's a topic for another day. We're talking the Craftsman Series lineup right now. And Chandler Mills, the number 8, replacing the departing Matt Chamberlain. He moves on to Snoots Enterprises at the Cup level for next season. And then you've got the one team being renumbered to the number 88, Garrett Hood, bringing his father's iconic number back to the ASCA. What a story this is, but talk about pressure for Garrett Hood. First off, we'll break down Chandler Mills. I think it's a really solid signing. Mills, 4-star prospect out of Mesa, Arizona, has dabbled in open wheel racing here and there, but obviously stock car is his calling. Yeah, I think it's a solid hire. There's not really much to critique when it's a 4-star prospect. It's just kind of putting the pound to the pavement, and seeing if he actually is worth that 4-star rating. And we're going to find out next season, obviously. But I think it's a solid hire. It also helps, again, 18 years old, extremely young, lots of time to develop. We'll see if he ends up doing so, because Matt Chamberlain really solid this season, but also no wins. So that's interesting. And I think that it's also interesting because, again, we don't know what's going to happen with Colin Ward. So if Ward, if they can't work out a deal with Ward, the 48 is going to be open next season. So we could, I'm not saying that we will see one of these guys up at the cup level, but they're not going to call Keelan Moore. Maybe they could go out, grab another big name free agent. Cameron Atwood, Carson Smith look like they're on the way out, but do they really? If they can't pay Colin Ward, they're not going to have the funds to pay an Atwood or a Carson Smith. So Ronnie Woods Motorsports are really kind of in a bind here, and they need either Mills or Garrett Hood to show a lot next season to make their decision a lot easier. And let's kind of get into Garrett Hood. The pressure is going to be on this kid. You bring your father's iconic number back, the 88. 18 years old, 3-star prospect. The hype surrounding him is going to be immense. The Hood last name, I don't think we've really kind of seen something like this, a prospect this hype coming up through the ranks solely based on their last name and their expectations. I would say probably Chris Barrymore. I think that's as far back as you have to go to see an iconic last name, second generation driver enter the sport. So this is different from the expectations out of a Caden Dunham. Obviously there were high, lofty expectations with him with the Del Val, but the Garrett Hood, he's got the Hood last name. He has a spot in the sport as long as he wants it, with being the son of a Hall of Famer. His pappy, love it or not, that's just kind of the way nepotism works, and you can't blame Jimmy Hood for it. Obviously, he wants his son to succeed, but it's a double-edged sword, because if Hood does not pan out here, they're going to say nepotism, just like they do with Caleb Moore. But if he does, then, they expect him to be on his father's level and be a Hall of Famer himself someday. So it's a double-edged sword with Garrett Hood. A lot of pressure is going to be on him, especially in his father's number like that. But it's a really cool touch to see the 88 back on track. It deserves to be back on track. And it's kind of sad that it's not at the cup level. Obviously, it's great to have the iconic number 5 back on track. Good to see that car back in victory lane for the first time since 2018. But man, like I just said, there's not much more you can say other than pressure, pressure, pressure. It's going to be turned up to 10 for Hood, and probably the most scrutiny a driver we're going to see in this sport under, especially a young driver, a teenage driver like Garrett Hood, a rookie, since Chris Barrymore. So those are the expectations for him. He's going to have to get out, perform right away, especially in Ronnie Woods Motorsports equipment, considering they're a powerhouse, one of the most iconic teams in the sport, and the team that obviously Jimmy Hood made his name at. So we'll see if the second generation Hood ends up panning out at RWM and could definitely solve a lot of this team's woes, financial woes at the cup level next season, if they cannot afford to keep Colin Ward under contract. Now, if they can afford to keep Colin Ward under contract, then things get interesting, because then you've got all 4 of those guys locked up on long-term deals. And it's well, where does Hood, where do Mills go if they do develop? But that, again, story for another day, story for another podcast. We'll talk about that a lot more in the off season. But now, final topic. Let's preview Computer Motor Speedway. Craftsman Series, as I mentioned, they're on bye this week for the final time this season. It's the Cup Series on full display, the Apple 225 upcoming. 3 races remaining in the campaign, 13 points between Braeden Bennett and Todd Kidd. It's also the final trip to Randall Woods at his home track. Still winless on the campaign, 52 race winless drought he's on right now. Boy, what I would pay to see him reach victory lane one last time here. Man, I really hope it happens. But obviously the championship is going to be first and foremost on Michael White Racing's mind. Braeden Bennett is right there. And I think that the key these next 2 weeks is going to be survival. Just bring home solid results. Do you need wins right now? No, you don't. You don't need a win this week. You might if Todd Kidd wins this race. Then you'll need one at West Virginia. But do you need a win immediately? No. So I would say just a solid top 5 is what you're looking for if you're Braeden Bennett. You have a 13-point cushion. Use it. Use up every last bit of it until we get down to the final bullet. Because even still, he'd have a tiebreaker over Kidd due to having more top 5 finishes. So use it. You have 13-point cushion, use it. Doesn't matter how much you win the championship by, as Todd Kidd proved last season. It just matters that you win it. And but that's not to say Michael Racing can't afford to not keep pushing. They need to keep pushing forward. And Bennett and Randall Woods are 2 guys I'm going to watch for them this weekend. Bryn Renner, of course, the most recent Computer Motor Speedway winner. Got to watch out for him as well. And of course, Ronnie Woods Motorsports as a whole. Obviously, they've won 6 of the last 8 races. Chris Barrymore led a race high 94 laps in the winless 300 here earlier this season. That 5 team has been on a roll. I will say, a little worried I'd be a little worried if I was Todd Kidd, because he wasn't bad, but he also wasn't great in the winless 300. And he's gonna have to step up his level. Again, this isn't the old Computer Motor Speedway; it's a new one. And he was nowhere in the All-Star race. He was nowhere in the 300. I'm a little worried that the 9 team, like I said it a couple weeks ago when we were previewing these final few weeks. Bennett should have the upper hand here. He should come in with the advantage. And that's why that 13-point cushion means that much more. Like, he already should have the upper hand here. Now he's got a big point cushion. That's why I'm just saying, solid result for Bennett, because I don't know if Todd Kidd can step up his level back to 4 straight top 3 finishes and back-to-back wins. I just don't at this point. So it's going to be interesting, to say the least. Could Ford get up there? Maybe. I think their best shot would probably be with Diego, because he was flying. Got as high as 2nd in the 300 before falling back on the final stint. But I think it's going to be another duel between Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Michael White Racing. They've been obviously the 2 dominant organizations this season. They mastered the new regulations by far. And if I had to pick a driver, I think I'm going to pick Braeden Bennett to win the race, actually. Don't count out Ross Jackson as well. Just want to throw him in there, because he was also really fast in the 300. Battled back to 2nd after a pit penalty. Watch out for that 23 as a dark horse, but I think I am going to pick Braeden Bennett, the safe option here, the championship leader. It's incredible to think he only has 2 wins this season. Like, you would think he'd have 3 or 4 by this point. He's going to get win number 3 on Saturday. But boy, would it be cool to see Randall Woods snap his 52-race winless drought at his home track, his final trip out to his home track. He is due for a win, and hopefully he can finally bring it home and snap his drought before his career is up. But that's it for another edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, and it's a light week upcoming at Computer Motor Speedway, but we'll break it all down for you in the next episode. See you then.